I had coffee this morning with one of my students that has been investing in real estate for 4 months. He's bought 3 properties in his first 4 months, and we got to talking about his story, what he learned, how he bought his properties, how he's funded it, and it was awesome to me to hear somebody's perspective that has just been starting. So I thought I would introduce him to you and have a conversation on the chairs behind me with him, because you don't really care about my 32-unit apartment complex or me owning my $40 million in real estate if you're looking to buy your first rental property. You want to hear the experiences from somebody who's doing it right now. Without further ado, I want to introduce you to Jason, a brand new real estate investor whose goal is to buy 12 rental properties this year. Let's go.
So 3 rental properties in your first 4 months of investing. Why don't you talk here a little bit about why you decided to get into real estate? Because you had a job, you had a good paying job, and you still have a good paying job, but what made you decide to veer from what you've been doing for a long time and get into real estate?
Sure, absolutely. So still have the long-term job and want to have that forever, right? But really it's about the long-term wealth building and looking for accumulation. So I've got the traditional 401k that you have through your work, and that's great and everything, but wanting to take more control of my future and knowing that real estate has historically been something that millionaires and other folks have been able to build generational wealth with something that has always been top of mind for me, right? And just wanting to find the right time to take action. So it's one of those things that a lot of people, myself included, have thought about something like this, but really don't take action, right? So a few years ago, my wife and I had been talking about doing real estate and getting to a point to where she could actually quit her job and basically kind of maybe do something on the side with real estate. And the stars somewhat aligned, right? I was listening to the Bigger Pockets podcast and heard this guy named Sam Prim, who I'd never heard before.
What a weirdo.
Yeah. I was like, man, who is this guy? And found out that you were in St. Louis, and then did a little bit more research and learned that you were actually in my backyard of O'Fallon, right? So just so happened that you were hosting a Buyers Club meetup that following week. So came in just to see what that was all about. There were about 200 folks there. So a lot of buzz, a lot of energy, met a lot of great people, including yourself, and learned a little bit more about the mentorship as well, right? So that combination of things really led me to kind of take that next step and did join the mentorship back in September, right? So since then, it's been great for me because, the mentorship's got online videos and programs, which are great, but also you have access to coaches, right? And there are calls on a weekly basis, multiple days a week. So you've got a lot of flexibility, and it works with your schedule very well. So with that, it basically provided a blueprint and some additional confidence that now was the time to take that next step, to take that action. And that's what I did. So again, started in September and just closed on my 3rd property today.
That's impressive. And I think what the mentorship, and this isn't a pitch for the mentorship, but what mentorships in general do, and you said it, but you said it a different way. I'm going to take the opposite approach. Was it took away all your excuses of not having a sounding board, your excuse of not having enough information, your excuses of not you in general, but people's in general excuses. They get taken away when all of those boxes are checked. And you talk a little bit about analysis paralysis, but you're smart enough and bold enough to know that, all right, all these boxes are checked. I'm going to do it now. And right. I think that was big. And that used to say control your future. You said that word, but my daughter was here this weekend with me and she had some fun with it. She's 6, so it does not say control your future, but you said it, and I was pointing to that, but that doesn't say that. Awesome. So you decided to take the leap. You got your first property. Let's briefly just go over your 3 properties, how you got them, and quick stories on them. So the first one, I know from our conversation this morning, you bought it. It was actually one of my old rentals, and let me tell the people why I was selling, because I rarely sell rentals. So Lucas and I have a rule of thumb that if a property, and I don't know the exact numbers on this one, but if a property needs $7,500 or $10,000 or more in repairs, and we've already bought it, already fixed it up, already refinanced it, we're going to sell that for break even or make a few grand rather than stick 10 or 15 grand into it. Doesn't happen very often. Sometimes we bought a property that was already lived in and we didn't really repair it, so it needed more work, or just happened to, not repaired enough and it needed more work. So that was one of these properties. We've probably only sold a handful of rentals, but you got one of them. So that's my part of it. So you bought the rental that was one of my probably first 5 or 6 rentals, which is kind of cool. You bought it. Why don't you just kind of briefly walk through how you bought it, and then how it worked out, and then kind of maybe a little bit about the fire. Yes. It was outside. Don't worry about the fire.
Yes. So actually, I didn't realize that it was one of your former properties until after the fact, right? So actually found it through the disposition website that FasterFreedom has, right? And there's a number of great homes out there, and happened to find that. And for me personally, within my buy box, the thing that I was comfortable with on that particular property is that while yes, it did need some repair work done, it wasn't like a major gut and rehab, right? So I wasn't ready to take that on. I wanted something that was a little bit more cosmetic, something that I could kind of cut my teeth with. And if I made some mistakes along the way, it wouldn't be anything too crazy, too outside the box that I could not actually recover from. So that was really something that appealed to me whenever I bought that particular property, and I liked the neighborhood that it was in as well. And in that particular neighborhood, I also feel like it's got stable and even long-term appreciation, right? So that was something that was important to me. So great thing about it is I was able to get that actually rehabbed and got that done through another individual who was in the mentorship as well. So that kind of worked out very well together as we're trying to both grow our investment portfolios. And so we did that and put a tenant in, and tenant moved in, great. She was very happy, very ecstatic for her and her 2 little girls. And the first week after she moved in, my wife and I were actually out on a date night. Had just finished dinner, and we're just out kind of running some errands, and we got a text from the tenant, because we are self-managing the properties at this point in time, and it was a picture of a power line in the backyard that was on fire. So
they're not supposed to be on fire, no, for those that don't know.
They're not, right? So the great thing about it, the tenant had already called the fire department. Fire department called the local utility company, and they came out, and everything was under control. We were also lucky that there had been some snow and wet weather on the ground, so nothing really caught fire. It was just the kind of sparks coming from the power line that we got in that picture. So the unfortunate thing is the tenant was out of the home for a couple of days. We actually did compensate her for some of the pain and suffering, right? Wasn't required as part of our lease agreement, but I feel like it's the right thing to do, right? And so we did that. She's back in the property, and everything is A-okay. The lesson I learned that I mentioned earlier today, and I'll have a shout out to Keola, because Keola actually knows the tree that is in that backyard. He pointed it out, and he pointed out that the branches were actually hanging over the house, right? And the big concern obviously is the branch falling on the roof, causing damage, and that can be an expensive repair. And the recommendation was we should probably do something about that tree. Looking to try and keep my budget intact, right, and under control. I did not do that. And the branch did not fall on the house, but it fell on the power line, and that is what happened. So going forward, I will be more conscious and aware of trees hanging over the house, and I will actually do something about this particular tree as well.
No, yeah, that makes sense. I think that's a big one there. Is obviously you can't foolproof in everything, but one of the things we try to do is trees over houses and apparently power lines. It's just you don't have to cut down the whole tree. You can, but at least trimming it up to keep it's a safety thing. Yes. My wife is a big tree hippie. She doesn't like cutting down trees, but if it's when it's a safety issue, it's got to happen.
Yeah,
so
it's that, and it's also preventative, right?
Yep.
So it's something that if I would have done it up front, it would not have impacted our personal time, right?
Yep. For sure. That's another part of it. So first one, good, few lessons learned. Second one, you actually bought from a local wholesaling company, which happens to be our company. But so from a local wholesaling company. So why don't you kind of talk through that deal, kind of lessons learned, a little bit about that one?
Sure, absolutely. So that particular property, that one is a three bedroom in a different part of town. Again, a great property, and it does need some updating, but everything within the property is still intact. It's functional, and it did have a tenant in place. So when I originally purchased the property, there was debate about trying to have the tenant move out and doing more of a traditional rehab and update and do that type of facelift, and then having to go find a new tenant, or should you just keep that individual in there even though she is at under market rent, and basically just not realizing as much cash flow as one might like. So we actually did go with the latter. We actually kept the tenant in the house. She's actually great. She's been in the house for years. She has no real motivation to move elsewhere. She's very easygoing, doesn't ask for anything. So the nice thing about that is we've got the stable income coming in. It's predictable, and she is not a needy tenant. So that is great. That being said, over time, I am going to be doing some small upgrades to the house just to continue to make her happy, keep her there for the long term. And then that will also be leverage that I can use when I want to increase the rent, which I will be looking to do. I won't do a drastic jump or anything like that where it's uncomfortable for her to where she would actually need to move out. Doing that gradual increase to keep her happy and in the house would be a win-win situation, I believe.
Yeah, I think a couple huge tips there where you sound like a pro already, but, treating people fair, both situations. You can be a slumlord or a landlord, you have the choice. There are way more good tenants out there than good
100%.
than good landlords.
Absolutely.
So if you're going to be a good landlord, you'll have your pick of good tenants. The other thing is taking and buying an inherited property, not just jacking up the rents, A, to be a good person, but B, strategically it's better for you. You jack up the rents, $200 on her, she stays and is pissy and is not as good tenant, or she leaves. And then the most expensive part about owning rental properties is the turnover. Even if a tenant takes immaculate condition, you're still not collecting rent when there's nobody living there. But most likely it's going to be a few hundred, if not $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 to repair things, get a rent ready, not collect rent. So that is not a good time. So you accrue for that in your cash flow formula with the vacancy, but you haven't been able to accrue very much because you just bought it. So at least allowing that 5 or whatever 7% vacancy you put every single month, at least allowing that to add up for when she does move out in 4 years, you'll slowly improve it, but there'll be a $2,000, fix at the end, let's say, but in 5 years you'll have $4,000 in that account, so that'll be no big deal.
Right, absolutely.
So
And the great thing
huge.
about that property, though, even though it is an under market rent, it still does cash flow nicely. It
Yep.
could be a lot more, but not wanting to be greedy, right? I'm very happy where it is. But to kind of going back to something you said earlier, right? I think it's really important to treat people with respect, right? And again, just to kind of make it win-win. So I'll give you an example. So her previous landlord / owner was more the latter, what you mentioned earlier, the slumlord, right? And so that individual, there was a situation where there was a sink in her main bathroom that was clogged, and that sink would back up. And in order for her to actually use that, she would have to put a bucket underneath the sink, drain it, go pour that bucket, throw it outside in order to reuse the main sink in her bathroom.
So it's like pretty much it was stopped up at some point.
100%. So something that's pretty basic. The previous owner, landlord, said they weren't going to do anything about it. So I learned of this, right, as I was going through the acquisition process, and I'm like, that's no way to live, right? So first thing we did when we actually acquired the house, went in, reintroduced ourselves to the tenant, let her know that we actually wanted to keep her there, asked her, what would make her life a little bit more comfortable. That was the only thing that she'd mentioned, right?
That's an easy fix to make her happy and
so
to
it
like
cost me
you.
maybe $150, $200 at that, right? And there were that sink and a sink in her master bathroom that were clogged. They were tied to the same line. There was something in there. Easy fix, done and done. And she's super happy. So
I love it.
Yeah.
A lot of lessons here. This guy's already a pro. All right. Property number 3 you just closed on today, so we don't have a ton of information, but I love the story of how you found this property. I tell people to go to meetups. You're going to meet everybody you need to meet. They all meet in one place because real estate investors are smart, so we're efficient. So that's actually where you got this property, right?
Absolutely. So I believe that networking and building relationships are very important, right? So you can do those at the local meetups. And so like I mentioned earlier, there's typically 150 to 200 people that come to this local meetup. And at the beginning, there's an opportunity for individuals to come up to talk about needs, haves, and wants that they have, right? An individual came up and said they knew of somebody that had a house coming up for sale because one of their friends had a medical situation. So I happened to talk with that individual after the meeting. We exchanged contact information. He sent me a text 2 days later, asked if I was still interested in talking about the property. Had a conversation with him. He got me introduced to the actual owner of the property. One thing led to another, and ended up closing on that one today.
That is awesome. So just talking, networking, and doing things, we'll kind of round it out here with basically you're doing things that make sense, and you would probably figure a lot of them out on your own, but you're following other people's lead that have been there. I tell people that all the time, whether it's a mentorship or not. He would figure a lot of this out on his own, and he probably has, but just having that there and having somebody else that's already walked that path show you where to walk. And you said it great earlier when we were having coffee. I say that the gutters or the guardrails, whatever it is, keeping you out of the gutters, keeping you out of the ditches, not telling you exactly what to do every single step, but just, hey, don't do that, do that. Just keeping you in the freeway and keep you going in the right direction is huge, and that's what leaning on other people can do for you, whether it be virtually via social media or an actual meetup or a mentorship like we have.
Absolutely. Try to learn from other people's mistakes, right, to help minimize your mistakes or things that have made them successful. Try and piggyback on those and see if you can apply them in your own world.
Awesome. So why don't you tell everybody your goals for the rest of the year, because he's like a lot of people that your goal isn't to quit your job next year. Yeah. You want to continue your job, you enjoy it, it pays you well, but you're looking for the long-term wealth, and real estate will help you do that. So what's your goals for the rest of the year?
So my goal for the rest of this year is I want to get 10 more properties in my portfolio. So that is the number that I want to put out there. Obviously, I want to be smart in the properties that I buy, so I just don't want to go out and buy them recklessly, right, just to kind of check that box to get the number. So I will be scrutinizing deals a little bit closer this year, right? Financing has gotten a little bit tighter with
talk a little bit about that. What's your take on things don't cash flow as much as they used to?
Absolutely. So my personal goal is obviously we always want the deals to cash flow. That is very important. And the deal is done whenever you can buy it at the right purchase price, right? I feel like that's where you can really reap the long-term benefits. So for me is trying to find the right property, right neighborhood at the right price. Even though it costs more to borrow money today, I have that long-term view. So yes, I want it to cash flow, but I'm not looking to use that cash flow on a daily basis in my personal life. The idea is that money is going to go back into the house to actually pay down the mortgage on that and get those paid off as quickly as possible. Even though the rates are higher, 6-7% today, the idea is going in cash flows today with those higher rates. I can look to refinance that hopefully in a year or two, get rates a little bit lower. Let's say they go back down 4 or 5, then my cash flow will be better, and I can look to apply extra cash flow to pay down the mortgage on my other houses.
I love it. You have long-term vision. You're not worried about the fact that real estate's been on fire for the last 2 years. It's very rare to have real estate appreciate so quickly and have interest rates so low. That those things usually don't happen. There's usually kind of this going on. So you're understanding the long-term vision. So I love it. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you doing this today. Hopefully those watching had learned a little bit and saw a different perspective rather than just mine. So I appreciate you being here, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it.